Prosecutors believe her mandatory minimum in prison will be 14 years.
What's your emergency?
What else to say? I just don't know. I didn't want to die in jail or prison. Yes.
Do you shoot if you're in Denver? I never liked her. She's devastated as any 73-year-old woman might be.
Thinking that Jonathan had the gun.
She doesn't deny that she shot him. This is not a whodunit.
Why did you keep shooting him?
Tragic tale unfolds as grandmother's unfathomable act leads to a chilling ending on Demise Row, shedding light on a heart-wrenching crime that shocked a nation. Background: Sandra Lane, a 75-year-old grandmother from Michigan, became the center of a tragic incident when her grandson was shot and slayed. The shocking event took place during a heated argument between Sandra and her grandson over the boy's drug use. The teenager, in a state of distress, made a desperate call to 911, revealing the horrific truth that his own grandmother had shot him. Following the incident, Sandra Lane was charged with homicide and had to face trial for her actions. Her defense lawyers argued that she had acted in self-defense during the altercation. The trial unfolded over several days, presenting evidence and testimonies to the Oakland County jury.
To the loft itself?
Yes, I did.
Conversation with him?
Yes.
What kind of conversation did
It
you have?
wasn't a conversation. It was swearing. He's yelling
Is he telling you he's taking the car?
in the head.
Sorry?
In the head.
In the head area? Tell us what happens when he kicks you, when it strikes you. What happens when you shoot the gun?
I'm running away. Stop him.
So you're trying to get away from him.
Scared. Yes.
Do you shoot if you're in Denver?
I don't know.
Are you still afraid?
Yes.
Ultimately, on March 19, 2013, Sandra Lane was convicted by the jury of second-degree slaying. The conviction indicated that the act was committed without premeditation, suggesting that the shooting occurred in the heat of the moment rather than as a pre-planned act. Charges: Granny Lane faced serious charges in relation to the incident where she shot her grandson. The charges brought against her included 1 count of first-degree slaying and 1 count of carrying a concealed weapon. First-degree slaying is a serious charge that typically involves the intentional slaying of another person with malice aforethought. In this case, prosecutors would need to prove that Granny Lane planned and carried out the act of slaying her grandson, displaying a willful, deliberate, and premeditated intent. Carrying a concealed weapon refers to the act of possessing a weapon that is hidden from plain view and not openly carried. It is considered a criminal offense if done without the proper authorization or permit, depending on the jurisdiction's laws. The slaying charge carries several penalties, including a potential life sentence in prison. However, since Michigan abolished capital punishment in 1846, Granny Lane was not at risk at receiving the ending penalty for her actions. If convicted of carrying a concealed weapon, she could face additional penalties, including a maximum sentence of up to 5 years in prison. These charges indicate the gravity of the situation and the legal consequences Granny Lane could potentially face. The prosecution would have to present evidence and arguments to convince the court of her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The ultimate decision would rest with the jury or judge, who would carefully consider the evidence and legal arguments before reaching a verdict. Trial and conviction. After the tragic incident where Granny Lane shot her grandson, a legal process ensued to determine her guilt or innocence. The trial played a crucial role in examining the evidence, hearing witness testimonies, and evaluating the circumstances surrounding the incident. The trial began with the selection of a jury, a group of individuals responsible for hearing the case and reaching a verdict based on the evidence presented.
911, what's your emergency?
Both the prosecution and the defense had the opportunity to present their arguments and call witnesses to support their respective positions. During the trial, the prosecution aimed to prove that Granny Lane committed first-degree slaying, demonstrating that the slaying was intentional, premeditated, and carried out with malice aforethought. They likely presented evidence such as the 911 call made by the victim and other witness testimonies to establish their case. On the other hand, Granny Lane's defense team sought to establish that she acted in self-defense, arguing that the shooting occurred during a heated argument over her grandson's drug use. They may have presented evidence and witness testimonies to support this claim. After both sides presented their cases and the jury heard all the evidence, they deliberated to determine Granny Lane's guilt or innocence. In this case, the jury reached a verdict on March 19, 2013, finding Granny Lane guilty of second-degree slaying without premeditation. Second-degree slaying typically refers to an intentional slaying that lacks premeditation or deliberation. In this context, it suggests that the jury did not find evidence to support the claim of first-degree slaying, but concluded that Granny Lane intentionally caused the demise of her grandson. As a result of her conviction, Granny Lane faced significant legal consequences. Second-degree slaying carries severe penalties, including a potential life sentence in prison. However, specific sentencing would depend on various factors, including the judge's discretion, any applicable sentencing guidelines, and the circumstances of the case. The trial and conviction marked the culmination of the legal process, holding Granny Lane accountable for her actions. The verdict was based on the evidence and arguments presented during the trial, as well as the jury's assessment of the case. Facts. On May 18, 2012, an unimaginable tragedy unfolded in Sandra Lane's home located in West Bloomfield Township, a picturesque Detroit suburb known for its manicured lawns and tranquil golf courses. The events that took place that day would forever alter the lives of the individuals involved and the community around them. The chilling details of the crime scene emerged during a preliminary hearing on July 2, 2012. With her hands raised in surrender, the frail and elderly 74-year-old Sandra Lane stepped out of her condo and confessed to law enforcement. "I slayed my grandson." This confession led the police inside the residence, where they discovered the lifeless body of Jonathan Hoffman, Lane's 17-year-old grandson. Inside the otherwise peaceful home, the scene was one of horror. Blood stained the floors and walls, while 9 spent ammunition cartridges and a Glock 9mm semi-automatic handgun were found scattered across the ground, according to the testimony of law enforcement officials. The evidence strongly suggested that Lane, a former schoolteacher, had fired the weapon 10 times, inflicting multiple gunshot wounds on Hoffman. The subsequent autopsy conducted by a medical examiner revealed 3 gunshot wounds in his chest and a total of 5 wounds in total. The tragic incident came to light through a 911 call made by Hoffman himself. In his distressed voice, he uttered the words that would haunt those who heard the recording: "My grandma shot me. I'm going to die. Help." Despite the efforts of emergency responders, the young boy succumbed to his injuries at the scene. Lane's defense team argued that she acted in self-defense, claiming that a struggle between Lane and Hoffman could be heard in the background of the 911 call. The defense presented a complex picture of their relationship, citing issues stemming from Hoffman's drug use. Toxicology results revealed the presence of synthetic marijuana, also known as spice or K2, in Hoffman's bloodstream during the autopsy. Living with Lane while his parents were going through a divorce, Hoffman attended a local alternative high school and had previously faced legal troubles related to marijuana possession. According to Lane's attorneys, the fatal altercation erupted after Hoffman tested positive for synthetic marijuana during a court-ordered probation meeting earlier that fateful day. It was not the first time law enforcement had been called to the residence for a domestic dispute, although no arrests had been made on previous occasions. Following her arrest, Lane was held without bond in an Oakland County jail, awaiting her formal arraignment. On July 12, 2012, she pleaded not guilty to a charge of open slaying. A small group of family and friends provided support during her court appearances, attempting to offer solace with smiles and waves. After a trial that lasted several months, the jury rendered its verdict on March 19, 2013. Sandra Lane was convicted of second-degree slaying. Although the jury had the option to consider charges ranging from first-degree slaying to involuntary manslaughter, they determined that Lane had intentionally caused Hoffman's demise without premeditation. With the conviction secured, a separate sentencing hearing would follow to determine the appropriate consequences for Lane's actions. The community and the families involved were left to grapple with the profound loss and the haunting question of how such a tragedy could unfold within the confines of a tranquil suburban neighborhood. Players. Sandra Lane, the central figure in this tragic case, is a 74-year-old woman with a background as a schoolteacher. Described by her neighbors as a sweet older woman who loved her family, Lane's actions in this case have shocked those who knew her. Jonathan Hoffman, Lane's grandson, is the victim in this heartbreaking incident. At the time of his demise, he was only 17 years old, standing at 5'5" and weighing 110 pounds. Lane's defense team has highlighted Hoffman's struggles with school and substance misuse, including his use of spice, a synthetic form of marijuana. This context is presented in an effort to shed light on the complex dynamics between Lane and her grandson. Lane's defense team consists of Jerome Sabata and Mitchell Riboutwer, both seasoned criminal defense lawyers who had previously worked in the prosecutor's office in the early 80s. Their experience and legal expertise will play a crucial role in presenting Lane's case and advocating for her defense. These players, including Lane, Hoffman, and the defense attorneys, form the key figures in this tragic incident. Their backgrounds, relationships, and legal expertise will shape the narrative of the trial as each seeks to present their side of the story and navigate the complexities of the legal process. As the case unfolds, the community, the families involved, and the legal system will grapple with the profound consequences of this devastating event. Legal commentary. The legal commentary surrounding Granny Lane's case focuses on the challenging task faced by Michigan prosecutors in proving premeditation and intent to kill. As of now, limited information is available, making it difficult to establish that Lane planned the slaying in advance. Consequently, Lane's defense strategy may revolve around asserting self-defense. Presenting a self-defense argument could be compelling to a jury if supported by the facts. The narrative would portray Lane as a kind-hearted grandmother who took in her troubled grandson when his parents abandoned him. In contrast, Hoffman's actions, such as being expelled from mainstream high school, getting arrested for drug possession, using drugs in Lane's home, causing domestic disturbances, and failing a court-ordered drug test, may paint him as the troubled instigator. This comparison, coupled with Lane's clean criminal history, could sway the jury's perception in her favor. The defense is likely to emphasize that Hoffman's behavior was uncontrollable due to drug use, and that he posed threats to Lane, leading her to fear for her life. They will argue that Lane resorted to using the gun as a last resort to protect herself and fired only when her grandson refused to stop his threatening actions. The struggle between Lane and Hoffman during the incident is another critical element. The noises heard on the 911 call indicate a physical altercation, leading to speculation that Hoffman may have attempted to disarm his grandmother. This information may be used by the defense to support their self-defense argument. However, the prosecution can counter by highlighting the fact that Lane had fired multiple shots, potentially indicating an excessive and disproportionate response. However, forensic evidence reveals that Lane fired the gun 10 times, resulting in 5 shots hitting Hoffman.
What else to say? I just don't know. I don't want to die in jail or prison.
you really felt so violated, why did you keep shooting him?
Additionally, blood evidence indicates that Hoffman managed to retreat to his bedroom upstairs, leaving a trail of blood. The prosecution will likely use these facts, along with Hoffman's placement of the 911 call and his retreat, to argue that he was the victim in the incident. It is important to note that the commentary acknowledges the limited information available to the public, making it difficult to predict the outcome of the case. As more evidence is presented during the trial, including witness testimonies and expert analysis, a clearer picture will emerge, helping both sides shape their arguments and allowing the jury to make an informed decision based on the evidence presented in court. Debate over self-defense. The debate over self-defense in Granny Lane's case revolves around the question of whether her actions can be justified under the legal principle of self-defense. The prosecution will argue that Lane's use of deadly force was unwarranted and that she did not face an imminent threat to her life, while the defense will maintain that Lane acted out of genuine fear and in an effort to protect herself.
You were fearful of the friends, right? And you had told him that you were fearful to the point that you wanted the jewelry to be hidden. You know is a dangerous weapon, yes? A gun, you know. You tell your husband, I bought a gun, yes?
The defense will likely emphasize the troubled history and behavior of Jonathan Hoffman, portraying him as a volatile and aggressive individual who posed a threat to Lane's safety. They may argue that Lane had endured a long history of confrontations and disturbances caused by Hoffman's drug use and erratic behavior. By presenting this pattern of behavior, the defense aims to establish a reasonable belief in Lane's mind that her life was in immediate danger, justifying her use of force. On the other hand, the prosecution will contend that Lane's actions were disproportionate to the perceived threat. They may argue that Lane could have taken alternative measures to protect herself, such as calling the authorities or seeking assistance from neighbors. The prosecution might also highlight the number of shots fired and the fact that Hoffman was hit multiple times, suggesting an excessive response that goes beyond what would reasonably be considered self-defense. The key to resolving this debate lies in the interpretation of self-defense laws and the specific circumstances of the case. Factors such as the level of fear experienced by Lane, her belief in the immediacy of the threat, and the reasonableness of her response will be critical in determining whether her use of force was justified. Ultimately, the outcome of this debate will heavily depend on how effectively each side presents its arguments and the weight of the evidence and testimony presented in court. The jury will need to assess the credibility of the witnesses, evaluate the circumstances leading up to the shooting, and carefully consider the principles of self-defense under Michigan law before reaching a verdict. Sentencing and potential penalties. The sentencing phase in Granny Lane's case is a critical stage where the court determines the appropriate punishment for her conviction. The potential penalties she may face depend on the specific charges and the sentencing guidelines in Michigan. As Granny Lane has been convicted of second-degree slaying, the most severe charge she faces, the potential penalties are substantial. In Michigan, second-degree slaying is a felony offense carrying a maximum sentence of life in prison. However, it's important to note that Michigan abolished the ending penalty in 1846, so capital punishment is not an option in this case.
Please take the verdict. Will the floor person please rise? The verdict of the jury. Please read the verdict form.
State of Michigan and the Circuit Court 2012-24-1986-FC, Honorable Denise Langsford Morris. Count 2, possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony.
Will the jurors please rise and raise your right hands? Members of the jury, defendant, as to count 1, first-degree murder, guilty of the lesser offense, second-degree murder, in the commission of a felony, in the manner and form as the people and their information in this case in charge.
During the sentencing hearing, the court will consider various factors to determine the appropriate punishment. These factors may include the nature and severity of the crime, the defendant's criminal history, the impact on the victim's family, any mitigating circumstances, and the defendant's potential for rehabilitation. The prosecution will likely present arguments for a severe sentence, emphasizing the tragic loss of a young life and the need for justice. They may seek a lengthy prison term to reflect the seriousness of the offense and to send a message that such acts of violence will not be tolerated. Granny Lane's defense team, on the other hand, will advocate for a more lenient sentence, highlighting her age, lack of criminal history, and any mitigating factors that may justify a more compassionate approach. They may present evidence of Lane's previously unblemished reputation and her role as a caretaker for her grandson, suggesting that her actions were out of character and influenced by extenuating circumstances. Ultimately, it will be up to the judge to weigh these arguments and consider the relevant factors in determining the sentence.
Members of the jury, have you agreed upon a verdict? If so, let your foreperson state.
County of Oakland, people of the state of Michigan, plaintiff versus Sandra Maxine Lane. Count 1, first-degree murder. Guilty of the lesser offense, second-degree murder. Possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony.
Great clerk, please continue taking the verdict.
Listen to your verdict as recorded. You do say upon your oath as jurors in this case, and as to count 2, possession of a firearm and commission of a felony. So you say, foreperson. So you say, all members of the jury. If so, say I do.
The judge's decision will be based on legal principles, societal norms, and the aim of balancing punishment with the potential for rehabilitation. The sentencing hearing presents a crucial moment for both the victim's family and Granny Lane. The victim's loved ones may have an opportunity to deliver impact statements expressing the emotional and psychological impact of the crime on their lives. Granny Lane, too, may address the court, expressing remorse, seeking forgiveness, or providing any additional information that may sway the judge's decision. The outcome of the sentencing hearing will significantly impact Granny Lane's future. Whether she receives a lengthy prison sentence or a more lenient punishment, it will mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, as she confronts the consequences of her actions and strives to find meaning and redemption within the confines of the criminal justice system. Michigan capital punishment laws. Capital punishment, also known as the ending penalty, is the most severe form of punishment imposed by the criminal justice system. In the case of Granny Flynn, who stands accused of slaying her grandson, it is essential to understand the capital punishment laws in Michigan to determine the potential consequences she may face. Michigan has a unique history when it comes to capital punishment. The state abolished the ending penalty back in 1846, making it one of the first jurisdictions in the United States to do so. This means that capital punishment is not an available sentencing option for Granny Lane or any other individual convicted of a crime in Michigan. The decision to abolish the ending penalty in Michigan was based on various factors, including concerns about the arbitrary and discriminatory application of capital punishment, the risk of executing innocent individuals, and evolving societal attitudes towards the sanctity of human life. The state's commitment to a justice system that focuses on rehabilitation, punishment, and deterrence without resorting to the ultimate penalty of demise has shaped its legal landscape for over a century and a half. In practical terms, the absence of capital punishment means that Granny Lane's maximum possible sentence for her conviction of second-degree slaying is life in prison. This represents the most severe penalty available under Michigan law and underscores the gravity of her alleged offense. It is worth noting that while capital punishment is not an option in Michigan, it remains a topic of debate and discussion on a national level. Some states in the United States still retain capital punishment, and its use continues to be a subject of controversy due to concerns about its fairness, effectiveness as a deterrent, potential for wrongful convictions, and moral implications. In Michigan, however, the focus lies on alternative forms of punishment, such as life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, as a means of ensuring public safety and providing a measure of justice for victims and their families. The absence of capital punishment in Michigan reflects the state's commitment to upholding principles of human rights, due process, and proportionate punishment within its criminal justice system. As Granny Lane's case progresses, her potential sentencing options will be limited to those provided by Michigan law, excluding the ending penalty. Public reaction and media coverage. The case of Granny Lane and the tragic demise of her grandson has captivated public attention and sparked intense emotions. The shocking nature of the crime, coupled with the complex dynamics between a grandmother and her troubled grandson, has stirred a mix of outrage, sympathy, and curiosity among the public. As news of the incident broke, media outlets quickly picked up the story, thrusting it into the national spotlight. Headlines blared across newspapers and television screens, grabbing the attention of people from all walks of life. Social media platforms buzzed with discussions, debates, and armchair analysis of the case, with everyone offering their own theories and opinions. The public reaction has been a cacophony of conflicting viewpoints. Some individuals sympathize with Granny Lane, viewing her as a frail elderly woman pushed to the edge by her grandson's alleged behavior. They argue that she may have felt threatened and resorted to desperate measures in an act of self-defense. These sympathizers see her as a victim herself, grappling with the challenges of raising a troubled teenager in a society plagued by drug-related issues. On the other hand, there are those who condemn Granny Lane, labeling her as a cold-blooded slayer who should be held accountable for her actions.
Prosecutors believe her mandatory minimum in prison will be 14 years. Sandra Lane's daughter, Jennifer Hoffman, she said that she would stay with them for several days. She said, yes, they knew that her son had issues. He had the issues with the mushrooms, but they even pointed out what people didn't even know is that Jonathan himself, that day, even though he was being described as being out of control, she and her ex-husband, Mr. Hoffman, both say that their son has really been a teenager. Something I do want to point out that the family did also say, Jonathan's parents, they just said that it's something they couldn't talk about before, because they've been asked not to say anything during the trial.
They argue that her grandson's troubled past does not justify taking his life, and that there were alternative ways to address the situation, such as seeking help from authorities or rehabilitation programs. They view the crime as a tragic reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked violence. Media coverage of the case has been extensive, with news outlets dissecting every aspect of the story. Journalists have delved into Granny Lane's background, exploring her life as a former schoolteacher and examining her relationship with her grandson. They have interviewed neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, painting a vivid picture of the individuals involved and their dynamics within the community. The media's role in shaping public perception cannot be overlooked. Sensational headlines, dramatic courtroom footage, and expert analysis have fueled the public's curiosity and thirst for information. This intense scrutiny has the power to influence public opinion, shaping the narrative around the case and potentially impacting the outcome of legal proceedings. As the case continues to unfold, public interest will likely remain high. The court of public opinion will weigh in on the merits of the arguments presented by the prosecution and the defense. The media will play a crucial role in disseminating information, providing analysis, and capturing the emotional impact of the trial. In this era of 24/7 news coverage and social media frenzy, the public's reaction and the media's coverage have become intertwined, shaping the way we perceive and discuss high-profile criminal cases like Granny Lane's. It remains to be seen how this collective fascination with the case will evolve and what impact it will have on the proceedings and the individuals involved. Impact on family. The impact of Granny Lane's crime on her family and the broader community has been profound, leaving behind a trail of heartache, grief, and shattered relationships. The devastating loss of Jonathan Hoffman, Lane's grandson and the victim in this case, has sent shockwaves through their immediate family and the community they belong to. For Lane's immediate family, the incident has torn apart the fabric of their relationships. The tragedy has not only resulted in the loss of a beloved family member, but has also thrust them into the center of a highly publicized criminal case. Emotions within the family are likely to be complex and strained as they grapple with the dual roles of grieving for Jonathan and confronting the actions of their own relative.
Thinking that Jonathan had the gun that she was having with John. Because if she did, I'd say, so we watched a basketball game, fire department and police, and I thought to myself, I hope it's not John.
Did you know that your wife had gone and gotten a permit to purchase just a gun?
No.
The once close-knit family may now be divided, with differing opinions on the guilt or innocence of Granny Lane and the impact her actions have had on their lives. Beyond the immediate family, the community in which Lane and Hoffman resided has also been deeply affected. The news of a grandmother slaying her grandson has sent shockwaves through neighbors, friends, and acquaintances. This tragedy has shattered the sense of safety and security within the community as it grapples with the realization that such a heinous act can happen within its midst.
You were fearful of the friends, right? And you had told him that you were fearful to the point that you wanted the jewelry to be, is a dangerous weapon, yes? A gun, you tell your husband, I bought a gun, yes?
The community may experience a collective sense of grief and sadness, mourning the loss of a young life and reflecting on the fragility of human relationships. Questions and concerns may arise about the underlying issues that contributed to this tragic event, such as drug misuse, family dynamics, and access to mental health resources. This case may serve as a catalyst for important conversations and initiatives focused on addressing these societal challenges and preventing similar tragedies from occurring in the future. Support networks and community resources may also play a crucial role in helping the affected individuals cope with the aftermath of the crime. Counseling services, victim support groups, and community-led initiatives can provide a much-needed space for healing, understanding, and rebuilding fractured relationships. The process of healing and recovery will take time, as individuals come to terms with the loss, grapple with their own emotions, and work towards rebuilding their lives. It is important to recognize that the impact of this crime extends beyond the immediate family and the local community. The story has garnered significant media attention, making it a topic of discussion and reflection on a larger scale. The tragedy may prompt wider conversations about issues such as intergenerational conflicts, family dynamics, mental health, and the role of community support systems. Ultimately, the impact on family and community in cases like these is deep-rooted and far-reaching. It serves as a reminder of the complex web of human relationships, the potential for violence within families, and the importance of nurturing healthy and supportive environments. It is a call to action for society as a whole to prioritize the well-being and safety of individuals and to address the underlying issues that can contribute to such devastating incidents. Analysis of legal arguments. The analysis of legal arguments in the case of Granny Lane involves examining the various positions presented by both the prosecution and the defense. These arguments are crucial in shaping the outcome of the trial and determining the guilt or innocence of the accused.
Well, you know, it really depends on who you ask. A lot of folks with the 6 shots that were fired, and there seemed to be some premeditation. Some people could have argued that's certainly within Hoffman. And they're going to talk about why Jonathan was living with his grandmother and her husband. But first, here's Jonathan's mother, Jennifer, who won't even call Sandra Lane her mother.
1. Prosecution arguments. The prosecution will likely argue that Granny Lane intended to kill her grandson and that the slaying was premeditated. They may present evidence such as the number of shots fired and the fact that Hoffman placed a 911 call, suggesting that he was the victim in this case. They may also emphasize Lane's actions before and after the incident, highlighting any inconsistencies or suspicious behavior that could indicate her guilt.
She doesn't deny that she shot him. This is not a whodunit.
And here, it belonged to Jonathan Hoffman, not Sandra.
Right, to Jonathan Hoffman. They show you the photograph of the nice little boy in school. He was up to a room. He was afraid. He was kicked in the chest. He was afraid. So you're not calm. Boom, boom, boom. You pull the trigger.
No complaints of injuries. She takes the gun upstairs. He had to listen. I've got to find a way to talk to him.
2. Defense arguments. The defense will likely assert that Lane acted in self-defense, aiming to protect herself from her grandson's threats and aggression. They may present evidence of Hoffman's troubled behavior, including drug use and involvement in previous legal issues, to portray him as the aggressor in the situation. The defense may also argue that Lane's actions were a last resort, emphasizing her fear for her own life and the struggle that occurred during the incident.
So first, what's your reaction to the response of the parents to this guilty verdict?
Anger is a mask for guilt. So they're very angry. They're angry at her.
All right, if you have these feelings, if you're feeling angry.
I don't know if they remembered to stay. And they trusted the mother. The problem was that they forgot ground. I don't know if it's too old, but the question is, was she the right one to have it overreacted? I'm not sure. In retrospect, she was a good choice.
This young man has to go back home, or when do you reach out to authorities for help?
I think you look for moodiness, because the most important is the child needs to be safe.
3. Evaluating the arguments. The strength of each argument will depend on the evidence presented and the credibility of the witnesses. The prosecution must establish beyond a reasonable doubt that Granny Lane had the intent to kill her grandson and that she planned the act in advance. They need to consider the defense's claims on self-defense and demonstrate that Lane's actions were not justified under the circumstances. The defense, on the other hand, must convince the jury that Lane's actions were a reasonable response to the perceived threat she faced. They need to demonstrate that she had a genuine fear for her life and that her use of force was necessary and proportionate. 1. Expert testimony and forensic evidence. Expert witnesses, such as psychologists or forensic specialists, may be called upon to provide insights into Lane's mental state, the dynamics of her relationship with her grandson, and the potential influence of drugs on his behavior. Forensic evidence, such as ballistics and blood analysis, will also play a crucial role in determining the sequence of events and supporting or challenging the different arguments presented. 2. Jury deliberation. Ultimately, it will be up to the jury to weigh the evidence, evaluate the credibility of the witnesses, and determine the validity of the legal arguments presented by both sides. They will consider factors such as the reasonableness of Lane's actions, her state of mind, and the overall circumstances surrounding the incident. The jury's decision will hinge on whether they find the prosecution's case convincing beyond a reasonable doubt, or if they are swayed by the defense's claims of self-defense. In conclusion, the analysis of legal arguments in Granny Lane's case involves a careful examination of the prosecution's efforts to prove intent and premeditation, as well as the defense's assertions of self-defense. The evaluation of evidence, expert testimony, and forensic analysis will be critical in shaping the jury's verdict and determining the legal outcome of the case. Controversies and ethical considerations. Controversies and ethical considerations surrounding the case of Granny Lane revolve around several key issues that have garnered public attention and sparked debate. One of the main controversies revolves around the claim of self-defense made by Granny Lane's defense team.
She was always a thorn in my side, to be very honest. I never liked her.
She's devastated, as any 73-year-old woman might be.
Well, we're pleased that the jury reached the verdict of murder in this case. It was a very emotional case for the victim's family and all involved.
Trying to get me to send him back, and she said she would take good care of him. Finishing out his last year of high school.
I never wanted him to leave Arizona. Nobody knows that, but we ended up taking care of her, and we still are, and she's doing wonderfully well, thank you very much, under the circumstances. Then I think John was allowing us to focus our energies exclusively on Jessica.
While self-defense is a recognized legal concept, critics argue that Lane's use of lethal force may have been excessive given the circumstances. The question arises as to whether her actions were truly necessary to protect herself, or if there were alternative means to de-escalate the situation. Another ethical consideration is the role of age and mental health in this case. Granny Lane, at 74 years old, may have been facing physical and cognitive challenges that impacted her decision-making abilities and her ability to handle the situation appropriately. The question arises as to whether her age and potential mental health issues should be taken into account when evaluating her culpability. The involvement of drug use by Jonathan Hoffman, Lane's grandson, adds another layer of complexity to the case. Critics argue that his drug use may have contributed to his behavior and potentially escalated the conflict between him and his grandmother. The ethical consideration here is whether drug use should be seen as a mitigating factor when assessing Lane's actions. The presence of a firearm in the household raises questions about responsible gun ownership and the potential dangers associated with easy access to weapons. Some argue that stricter gun control measures could have prevented this tragedy, while others maintain that responsible individuals have the right to defend themselves in their own homes. Furthermore, the case raises concerns about the impact on the wider family and community. The loss of a young life and the subsequent legal proceedings can have lasting emotional, social, and psychological effects on those involved. Ethical considerations involve providing support and resources to affected individuals and addressing any underlying issues that may have contributed to the tragic events. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.